This is the getting started video for homework number 7. Death by 1,000 strings. First thing you want to do is you want to download the homework from Blackboard and read through all the problems. Remember, you can't use any built-in string functions. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different problems. First one is string length. The second one is string copy. The third one is find letter. The fourth one is find letter in reverse. The fifth one is concatenate or append. The sixth one is it will copy a string in reverse order. The seventh one is all uppercase, so make a string uppercase. The eighth one is substring, and the ninth one, this is a very challenging one, is count words. And then finally, number 10, what you have to do is call each and every one of those from main to make sure that they all work correctly. Now that's going to find out if you have any buffer overruns in any of your code. Oh, finally, step number 11, print it out and turn it in. That applies only when I teach this class live. Obviously, we don't meet, so you're going to have to zip it up and turn it into Blackboard. Next, you're going to want to fire a Visual Studio and copy the code template in there, make sure it all works correctly. So go ahead and run that. Or not. Oh, there it goes. So it pops up. Let's get that on the screen. So that works correctly. And we go back to the homework, and it says problem number 1, string length function. So I'm going to walk you through the brute force just to give you one more example of this. So we are going to declare our variable str source, make that size 50 equals I love Star Trek. By the way, if any of you guys are wondering where I get the size 50 from, that is the default string size that I use for databases. And the first thing that we're going to need length this, so int length equals 0. And let's go look and see what the homework wanted as far as comments, as far as step number 1. Here we go. That's the kind of thing it wanted. Hey, why don't I just copy and paste that? Press that in there. Now it's using a long. Let's go ahead and change that to an integer. I will fix that in the homework before I post it, and we'll use length on that. There we go. So that's the length. The only thing now is we got to write that function. We use main as a template for that so that I'm consistent. Remember, your procedures should be in the order that they are called. So we'll call this string length. Return the string length. And that's an integer. Where's my spaces up there? So I'm going to try to do this from memory. I do not want to look at the video if I can avoid it, at least the first time. Why? Because that blank tableau, that blank sheet of paper, is a really important experience. You need to sit there and struggle with that a bit so that when you go back and do look at the reference material, it gets burned in better. So let's go ahead and try to recreate this from memory using the brute force. Oops, I forgot my source. Char str source. We're passing in a string of any length. Now if str source spot 0 is equal to the null terminator, then that means our int length is equal to what? 0, that's right. And we could have, I don't know, 10, 15 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we would keep doing that until some huge number, and then we would run a return the int length. Now that's hackery programming. That isn't very efficient. But once it's in that format, it cries out for a loop because we see it's the same lines repeating over and over. Now, do we know the start, stop, and step? No. Well, we know the start is 0, and we know the steps are 1, but we do not know the stop. That's the mystery. So we can't use a for loop. We must use a do loop. Now, do we do pretest or post-test? We do a pretest because the string may be empty. So we say while str source sub int index, oops, got to have a new variable, while that's not equal to 0, what do we want to do? We want to increment our int index plus equals 1. So let's go up here and make ourselves an int index variable equals 0. And that's happy. And this extra little step, int length equals int index. Again, I do that for readability. You don't necessarily need that. And so that is the brute force example. And then this is the loopized pretest. So pretest because string may be empty. And we'd want to go ahead and run that and test it. And we should get back, oops, we should get back 17 because I threw an exclamation point on there. Now in this example I used a string literal. I could have also used a variable. So let's go ahead and try it with that. Bring that into view and we get 17 again. Why? I should be getting 16 on that. Oh, /n. That's why. Let me go ahead and take that out. Right there, because I use that example all the time. I know the length is 16. There we go. Outstanding. Now, let's try with an empty string just to make sure it works. So I'm putting in an empty string literal, and I should get back 0. Yes, I do. Now, let's just for the heck of it change our code and use a do while. Now what's going to happen, we'll step through that with the debugger. Come here, give me debug. There it is. Oops, need a semicolon there. We're going to see what happens when that runs. We're going to step through it and see what kind of crazy results we're going to get. So let me bring up the window so you can see here. Now the source says it is 0, and if we look at that in memory, we know that first character is 0. However, we immediately step past it. And what is that second character? Oh, we got lucky. It just happened to be a 0. So it returns a length of 1. Wow, that is so wrong. There may have been garbage left over in memory, and we might have gotten a completely different answer. So that is why we have to use a pretest loop for empty strings. And that is how you do problem number 1. Moving along with problem number 2. It says we have to do a copy. So we have to copy the source string to the destination. So let's switch back to our code. I will use string length as a template. Now, oops, I don't know why that let me run that. I should have had a prototype for it. Huh. That's kind of weird. It worked without a prototype. I don't know why that happened. Very strange. Alright, who knows? So this will be string copy. And now remember, we have to use the terminology, or the C terminology, which is source and destination. And remember, destination comes first. And so copy the source to the destination. And while the source is not equal to 0, we are going to say, well, here, let's do it the brute force way. And we will say str destination spot 0 equals str source spot 0. Wow, I'm a little slow today. There should be a void. There. I deliberately left one other error in there if you guys can see it. We'd say destination is equal to 0 and then spot 1 in destination is equal to spot 1, and then 2, and 2, and so on. Now, by the way, don't ever feel bad about doing it the brute force way to wrap your brain around it first. Doesn't hurt to plan things out. So that's what we want brute force. Now I'm getting these little squigglies, and I'm guessing at some point you're going to run into the same problem. And it said, error expression must have pointer type object to it. So you may be thinking, oh, I got to change this to a pointer. No, we left off the brackets. Oh, yeah. And while we're at it, let's go ahead up here and make our prototype for it. So we paste that in, throw a semicolon. Alright, now if you want to avoid or help out the grader, we can say problem number 1, problem number 2. See, that sort of thing really helps. So we got that in there. This is the brute force way. Once we see it in that format, we know that we can use a loop. Well, and so do we know the start, stop, and step? We know the start, that's 0. Do we know the stop? That's 1. Do we know the finish? I'm sorry, the start's 0, the step is 1, the stop we do not know. Now we could get the length by calling problem number 1 of str source, but the problem with that is it's going to go through the whole source string twice. Once to get the length and then once to do a copy. So we don't want to be wasteful, so we're going to use a while loop. So while str source sub int index is not equal to 0, what are we going to do? We're going to take one of these lines, paste it in the middle, and we're going to replace the hard-coded array index with our variable. Then we're going to increment our index, plus equals 1, and there it is, and we're finished, right? No, what did we forget? We forgot to terminate. str destination spot int index equals 0, and we can get rid of our brute force code. Little comment action, copy each character. And now we come up to main. Problem 2, copy string, and we're going to call copy string, or is it string copy, or yeah, it's string copy, not copy string. And we are going to, into the destination, we are going to copy the source. And problem 2, string copy %s. Now we get to temporarily cheat when we print out. Now, oh, I have not declared my destination. And we'll initialize that to a blank string. And, oh, str source, there we go. So, whew, oh, trying to assign it to a length. Boy, all kinds of problems here. Now you are allowed to printf using the print %s for strings. That is legal. That is not really a built-in string function. I'm not worried about you learning how to do that one character at a time. So let's go ahead and read this, run this, and bring it into the viewport. I get I love Star Trek. And just to make sure it printed absolutely correctly, I'm going to put single quotes around it to make sure I don't have any funny characters on either side. There we go. Excellent. And that is how you do problem number 2. Problem number 3. Write a function that takes source and letter-defined as parameters. The function will return the index of the first occurrence of the letter, case-sensitive, in the string searching from left to right. Return -1 if the letter is not in the string. Ha! This sounds exciting. Alright, so we will copy our string copy function as a nice little template. Now, what will be a good name for this function? Well, how about find letter index? Some in VB, this function is called index of, so I would take either one of those. It returns an integer. It takes a source character, or source array of characters, and char chr letter to find. Put that in there. So find first occurrence of letter case in sensitive, that means, or I'm sorry, case sensitive, that means case is significant, from left to right. There we go. Now we know we're going to need an index, but how about we start off with an int letter to find index, and we initialize that to 0 because that's all we do. Now that's what we always do. Let's go ahead and do this the brute force way. So we'd say if str source sub spot 0, equals CHR letter to find. By the way, the prefix for character variables is not CHAR, it's just CHR. If that equals that, then the nth letter to find index equals 0. And we'd have a whole bunch of those. We'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, ... all the way up to some big number n. 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now, as soon as we see it in that format, it screams and shouts what? Fruit Loops, because it's breakfast and I'm hungry. No, do loop. Why do loop? Well, because we do not know the stop. So, and it's got to be a pretest because the string may be empty. So while str source is sub 0 is not equal to the CHR letter to find, what are we going to do? Well, we are going to int index plus equals 1. And then we're going to return the int index. Well, we could just say int letter to find index. We'll do that same little trick that we did with length equals int index. And then, there we go. So we think that's a good try. We need to go ahead and test it. Okay, so we got to make our prototype. Come up here and copy that. Problem number 3. Paste that in, throw a semicolon on the end. Do some copy action here. Problem number 3. Find letter. Need another variable for that, so int index equals 0. Int index equals find letter index, and on the source, and now we want to pass in a character, not a string. So some of you might try to do like F in double quotes, and that wouldn't work because it's expecting a character. So how do we get a character? We put single quotes around it. So let's try to find the first T, Star Trek. So that should be at index 0, 1. Oh, how about something easier? How about L? We'll use L in love. So that should return 0, 1, 2 because that is the second index. Now, by the way, do not add 1 to offset that. So find letter index. So %d, and that's int index, and we go ahead and run that. Oops, and something very interesting happens. We get nothing back. Sounds like we're in an infinite loop. So what do? We pause, and we look at our index. Whoa! Our index is -2 billion. What happened there? Well, what we did is we broke the mold. Oh, we want to put our index in there. So let's go ahead and run that again. And it did return index equal to 2. Now that's all hunky-dory, but that's only half the problem. What if the letter is not in the string? Remember, what does it say? It says return a -1 if the letter is not in the string. Okay, so we need to test for that. So we come up here and we pick a letter that is not in the string. For example, X. We go ahead and run that. And we get an index of 732. How did that happen? Well, let's step through it with the debugger. Put our breakpoint in, go ahead and debug it. And we're going to inspect what's at that character. And it says I. And by the way, we can go ahead and right click on that and add that to watch. And then it's in our watch window, and we don't have to keep mousing over that every time. So we'll hit play to go next. We get space LOVESTAR or K. Hey, it should have stopped there, shouldn't it have? But no, what happened? It kept on going. And it's just cruising off into memory. And index is now way past the end of our string. And now it's past the size of our string. We're in a 55. We're starting to get some crazy values. Now what happened here? We broke the mold. Anytime that we are looking for something in the end of a string, we always want to say while the character is not equal to 0, and we want this every time. That guarantees we will always get out of the loop correctly, that will never run past the end of the string. Then if we're looking for something inside, we want to use an if. Is this the character we are looking for? Or if you want to flip it around, character for which we are looking. There, then we didn't end the sentence with a preposition. So if str source sub int index equals chr letter to find, yes it is, then what do? Well, that is, then we set that equal to int index, and we save that, and then we no longer need this line at the bottom, and we return that. So let's go ahead and test with that. Go ahead and run it, and it returns index equals 0. Well, it didn't find it, but the problem is our initial value is 0, so we need to change that to -1 as per the instructions, and that way if we don't find it, we do return a -1. So let's see if that works. And it returned -1. Alright. Let us try another test. Let us see, do I have the same letter here? Let me, and Star Wars. Let me look, oh I know, we'll just leave it at that. Let me look for a lowercase r and see what I get with that. It's always important to test various combinations. Now why is r special? Well, because r appears in the string twice. So I should get the first occurrence as per the instructions. And what did I get? I got 13. Uh-oh. I got the second occurrence. That is not what I want. So we'll go down here and we're going to find the letter. So let's do some comments. Check each character. And yes, save the index, and then after we find it, we want to break out of the loop. Now the easy way to do that, stop searching, is to use the break command. So that will find the first occurrence. So as soon as it finds it, it stops. If it doesn't find it, it returns -1, and that works correctly. So let's go ahead and test that again with an X. And it returned -1. Awesome! So that is how you do the first 3 problems, and that is the end of the Getting Started video.